Hello, my name is Elizabeth Roscoe. I'm going to be doing a lecture on Karen Horney and her theory on the foundations of neurosis, and basically basic anxiety and how she thought about how social interactions influences our personality. But before I start, I'm going to go over a quick bio of her. She was born on 1885 in a village near Hamburg, Germany. In 1913, she got her degree at the University of Berlin. And there she met her husband, Oscar Horney, which she was in a marriage for 17 years. It ended very badly. It was one of the worst moments of her life. She experienced a lot of depression, and that influenced her to pursue studies in psychoanalysis. 1932 to 1952, she went to the U.S. and served at American Institutes for Psychoanalysis. Then in 1941, she began the American Journal of Psychoanalysis. And then in 1952, she passed away, ending her whole studies and stuff. But with that end of the bio, I'm going to start giving a lecture on her theory. So I'm just going to start off with saying that she believed that everyone experienced basic anxiety, and basic anxiety is basically this sense of helplessness and the sense of feeling cheated on, any negative emotions that might affect someone to fear any social interactions is what basic anxiety basically is. And everyone feels this. Keep in mind, everyone feels this according to her theory. And so at a young age, we're made to feel, at a young age, we start feeling a sense of basic anxiety and sense of helplessness and start creating these defense mechanisms, which I have right here: affection, submissive, power, and withdrawing. So when affection, people who use this self-defense mechanism, they try to attain affection as much as they can, either by threatening someone to love them, bribing them, or having that submissive role. And then this kind of overlaps with the second one, which is being submissive. And that's taking the inferior role. And people who express this type of behavior tend to not want to take the dominant position and don't want to disappoint people or make a mistake. So they take in the inferior role and let others lead them. And then power, attaining power, this is very aggressive behavior. You tend to want to surpass people, tend to be against other people. And you want to take the dominant role because you don't want anyone to make you feel like you've been cheated on or hurt or anything that makes you feel inferior. And then the last step, which Horney really, I think, related with, is withdrawing. And you are very detached in withdrawing as a self-defense mechanism. You try not to be too affectionate, too emotionally involved with people. The depth of your social interactions are not that meaningful, when you're withdrawing. And so these are the self-defense mechanisms we start at a young age and we start having also through adulthood. But she built on off of that with saying that we as humans have 10 neurotic needs that we need to have a stable mental state, And so she says that we need affection and approval, a dominant partner, power, exploitation, prestige, admiration, achievement, self-sufficiency, affection, and narrow limits to life. And what that basically means is that all this really helps build a person to feel stable and not feel that sense of basic anxiety. And if we ever lack any of these, we'll have that sense of anxiety. And this doesn't mean that the person has to have all these 10, but having some of these in categories creates that assurance and makes sure that you don't feel that extreme helplessness. And so a lot of these, you'll see that a lot of these needs can lead to having, I would say, an extreme spectrum of a personality, or 3 types of personalities that people tend to have. And these are fluid and interchangeable. All of her theory is very fluid. You're not stuck in one category, But let's go on. So for affection and approval and a dominant partner, you have a compliant personality. You have an aggressive personality when you seek prestige, power, admiration, and achievement. And then you have a detached personality when you seek profession and self-sufficiency. And then when it comes to compliance, You actually move towards people. You want people's approval. You want people's affection. You want people to you want people to want you, you know? And then with aggressive personalities, you want to be the dominated one. You want to surpass people. Like the self-defense mechanism, it's kind of the same thing. And same thing for the detached personality. When you become so self-sufficient, you start forgetting how to get involved in social interactions, so you avoid them and you move against people and start being more, how would I say this, just keep to yourself. And so just a little recap of everything so far. So we have basic anxiety, and we have self-defense mechanisms, and then we have 10 neurotic needs that tend to stem 3 types of personalities when we have a certain concentrated needs. If you understand, like concentrated, like let's say you want pure affection and you want a dominant partner, you'll have a very compliant personality, you know. But the last thing that she talks about is self-image. And this is very important because self-image is the root to really all the basic anxiety, all the unreliantness of yourself, feeling like you can't do anything or feel hopelessness. All of this is rooted on the individual, you know. And so with self-image, we have this idolized image of ourselves, right? Where we want to be pretty, we want to be smart, we want to be all these things. And at some point, we realize we can't be these things. And there's 2 routes where this goes. When we realize we can't be the self-idolized image, we become either content and start loving who we really are and accepting that those are the circumstances and I have to accept that this is who I am. Or you become negative and start getting depressed and start feeling like, what the heck, like my life is over. Or you'll always want to be that self-idolized image, but you'll never get there because it's just an idolized image. It's an idol. It's just difficult and very unrealistic to get there, you know. And from all this, you know, we can see that each category of the 3 personalities has this sort of like self-idolized image. When you have affection and approval, you want that approval. You have that self-idolized image that everyone's gonna love me. But then you get the negative aspect of it and you get a dominant partner who may be very controlling or very abusive. Same thing for aggressive behavior. You want the admiration and achievement, but then you start exploiting people. Okay? And then for detached, you know, you have this self-image of being very perfectionist, very self-sufficient. But the negative aspect is your life gets narrowed. You don't live life to your fullest potential. You don't have the social interactions that are meaningful and bring so much more to your life. And so all of this that she discusses really just helps us understand who we really are and how we think and how we perceive the world and how social interactions really just change and influence our personalities. Okay, and so I want to move on to a few questions that I want to discuss. So the first one is, how did Karen view women? Karen actually went up front, like stood up basically to Freud and said that penis envy seemed very unrealistic, that womb envy is what actually is the situation, that men envy women who are able to bring life to this planet, to be able to, you know, nurture and all that, because I mean, Mother Nature, you see it everywhere. Nurture and bringing life is the real, I would say, the real deal, the real awesomeness, you know, of a woman. And so she was very pro-woman. You can see that she created feminine psychology, you know, so there was no negativity towards women, definitely not from this person. The way she viewed religion, I looked all over the internet. I didn't see anything about her being any like affiliation towards a religion, but she was very spiritual. From seeing her theory, it really connects with her life, and you see her actually trying to do a lot of actualization, a lot of self-realization, a lot of like just, I would say, kind of seems a little similar to therapy and meditation, you know. And she does feel like the way personality works is that it's very fluid, it's constantly changing, and it really depends on how you interact with people. She said one thing about how like personality is like a trend. Like you either suppress some and you feel one, but it depends on the situation. And it's like every sexual interaction we have, it depends how we feel about the person is how we're gonna act and how they're gonna view us. Because you know we have different faces we give to different people. And so she does feel like it's very important, infancy in particular, how infants are at the beginning, how infants are at the beginning really affects our personality. She did believe that babies in particular, their first interaction with their parents really change and influence their personalities. I mean, it's the first interaction, you know. She says, and she describes that her father was very dominating and very aggressive, and so that made her want to have a compliant personality at the beginning because she wanted his affection and his approval. But then later on, she has this realization, and she builds onto a aggressive personality, which moves on to a detached personality as her end of the years of life, end of her life. At her end of her life, she becomes more detached after her marriage, which ended horribly. So definitely infancy had an effect. I would say she believes that. And so what makes her very interesting is her ideas of how her theory is very fluid. I think that's very interesting. I don't think a lot of theorists really think about how fluid our mentalities can really be. I feel like a lot of the theories I've been reading have been very straightforward, very strict. I feel like they have this just cause and effect, when it's really like at its core a bit more deeper meaning, you know. And that's what I really love about her. And so if I had Karen actually, like, you know, give me therapy or anything like that, or actually ask me questions, I feel like she would have said that I am a very compliant person and a very detached person when it comes to love relationships or any other relationship to begin with. I'm very detached. I don't really like to have deep or meaningful relationships because I have a fear that people are either gonna like make fun of me or feel or be embarrassed of me or just hurt me. And I've been through a lot of stuff like when it comes to social interactions, and I've just learned to just keep to myself, honestly. But I also have become very compliant in the workplace, and I don't say no to a lot of things. I'm usually the yes woman at my work, and so I would see her saying that I need to like chill down on that and be more self-sufficient, but also remind myself to be focused on achievement and be focused on affection, but on a different aspect. Like be affectionate to others instead of seeking affection to myself, you know. And so who I'm going to compare her to is actually going to be the theorist Alder, who really developed a lot of like individual psychology. And I do think that they both kind of are very similar because both Alder and Karen focused on the individual a lot of the time when it came to conscious and unconscious mind, and they both also believe that social environments, social interactions influenced people. The only difference is that Alder was very focused on like the dynamics and the ecological system between people, and I think that's the main difference because there's something fun. There's actually something very funny. Alder talked about how like birth order really had an effect on personality. He says how the middle child born feels like he has to surpass the firstborn. And Karen was actually a middle-born child, and her brother was the firstborn, and he was like the favorite and most attractive. And for the longest, she felt like she was just this secondary person, secondary role, and she envied her brother. And then it wasn't until she realized her full potential when it came to intelligence that she let go of that. But definitely I see those differences, just that Alder was more ecological, family dynamics when it came to individual psychology, and Karen was more focused on social interactions and the way we perceive ourselves, our self-image, how that affects the way we interact with people, you know, instead of the other way around, the dynamics and the roles and the labels that affect the psychology and the way we view ourselves, you know, which Alder discussed. And so with that, the main source I used was this textbook. And yeah, that